something's wrong here. So I had to figure out what it is, and then I found it in the book. They just weren't following the plan. And it took somebody to go and tell them, you're not following it. And I had to go to the UPC, and I had to tell them, they are not in compliance. And they looked, and they said they're not, and they said, okay, you're not going to be approved. But it took somebody and a plan, a tool that you had that was easy to figure out, and somebody to make sure that they get back on track and start following the plans. And these guys want more density, and they want more signs, and they want more height. And I see that in your comp plan. You're giving them the heights, because right now it's 26 feet is the maximum height. Now you want to go up to 30. And they want more density, but because we have view regulations, we can keep them down with the density, but you're allowing them to do more density, which isn't going to work for us, because we are on the west side. We have a lot of traffic, and it comes from Rio Rancho, and they need to get through Coors to get into town to go to these jobs. And you now are labeling us premium transit, which is the highest density type transit-oriented development that you can put on a corridor. And you didn't talk to the neighborhoods about this designation. We never knew we were labeled premium transit, which is going to require all this density, and that will ruin. I mean, you think the traffic's bad now. It's just, at least we got some pockets of large lot, kind of rural-like areas, and near the river and up in Alvin Hills, that gives a little sign of relief. But we cannot afford to have that kind of density, and that's what your plan is all about. And so that's why we're saying this is top down. Nobody talked to us about it being that kind of density, because I can make some recommendations.
I'm ready. First of all, the visioning exercises that we did in May and June of 2015 identified cores for premium transit. So it was about 350 different people working in small groups saying, where should we have the best transit in Albuquerque? And Coors was actually the most identified corridor of all. That's where the premium transit designation came from. I know that one of the counselors is working on an amendment to propose on March 6th that would remove the premium transit designation from the comp plan. So if you want to support that amendment, please come and say that that's what you'd like to have happen. In terms of density, I personally don't agree that the comp plan is talking about density everywhere. It is talking about density in centers and along corridors so that you don't get density everywhere else. The play is, if we have to absorb growth somewhere, the most appropriate places to absorb it are along corridors and in centers. And in the rest, the areas of consistency, that's where you don't want it. And there are actually policies in the comp plan that say discourage higher density residential in those areas of consistency. Last thing, Renee, actually I want to go back. You brought up how hard it is to look in the integrated development ordinance and find the regulations in multiple sections. Now imagine being a city planner, or even worse, a front counter person, and someone in it comes in and asks a question, and you're not just flipping section to section, you're now flipping through a stack of documents trying to find an answer, when each one is done in a completely different organization, each one has a different level of detail, each one has different standards. So that same challenge.
You have a planner. You have a planner on staff.
Excuse me.
Wait.
Just let her finish, and then you
Well,
will
I
finish.
just want to respond to her.
Hold on, she will.
So the very challenge that you bring up is a challenge that most of the planning department staff has with the system on the left. And yes, you may have to flip section to section on the right, but it's all there for you to find. And when I go to a meeting like this and you ask me a question about what's in the city's zoning code, what can I do? I have one book and it's here and I can answer your question, even if I have to flip to multiple pages.
Thank you.
Actually, when I read the current comp plan, it is a lot easier to understand, and it makes sense. And you take in all the policies from that comp plan and the sector plans and the area plans, and you put them into one book. It's really hard. And I don't know how anybody's going to be able to understand that now, because that stack of books, you just need one of those as cores. And that's all you need. And you've had planners that were experts on it. And then you move them to other areas, and then you put somebody in that has no idea. And they have to get educated. So I don't know why you move them.
Staff changes.
Because I know why. Because I heard because the developer complained that they enforced it. They were planners that enforced the rules. And if the developer complains about them, they get moved to somewhere else.
Well,
I just want to
address-
say, if it's easier to enforce the rules because you have them all in front of you, more rules get enforced.
Well, I want to address your statement that all you need is one plan, the Coors Quarter Plan, to look at development on Coors. But our current planning system, in the planning ordinance that's in the city's code of ordinance, has 3 types of master plans. There's rank 1, rank 2, and rank 3 plans. The rank 1 plan is the comprehensive plan. That's the overall guiding vision. Rank 2 plans are area plans and facility plans. Area plans cover larger geographic areas, not the entire city or county, like the West Side Strategic Plan, the North Valley Area Plan. And then you have rank 3 plans. Rank 3 plans are your sector development plans, which are mixes of policy and regulation. So when you look at the planning ordinance, it says the rank 1 comprehensive plan is the master plan for the city, and then all the other lower ranking plans have to comport with and comply with and be in line with the comprehensive plan. So when you're looking at something along Coors for a zone change, for example, you have to look at the Coors Quarter Plan for its very specific policies for the area. You have to look at the West Side Strategic Plan, which has specific policies for the West Side at times and for individual communities on the West Side. And then you possibly might have to look at the Major Public Open Space Facility Plan if the site is near the Bosque, or if the site is near the Petroglyph National Monument. You might have to look at the Northwest Mesa Escarpment Plan. And you have to look at the comprehensive plan. And if any of the lower ranking plans are in conflict with the highest ranking comprehensive plan, the planning ordinance says those lower ranking plans, those portions that conflict, they may be void. And that's an actual word, they may be void. And because the rank 3 plans have not all been updated over the past 40 years, not all of the area plans have been updated over the past 20 years that they've been written, and the comp plan has only been more recently updated in the early 2000s, you have this hodgepodge of, does it comply with the comp plan? Does it say more than the comp plan? Is it too specific? Is it not specific enough? We have these debates and discussions at the Planning Commission and at the City Council regularly. You know, what order do we look at them? Does the comp plan take precedence over the more specific policies in the sector plan, or is it vice versa? There is confusion that happens at the staff level, at the neighborhood level, and at the decision maker level with our existing system, and we're trying to make it more rational and more coordinated across the whole city so that it works as one big system that sees the big picture, but also addresses individual communities and special, unique circumstances that can't be replicated or use policies that are only applicable in another area.
But your comp plan,
You have another question, go ahead.
your comp plan is, is the goals for the whole city. And your area plan has to reflect the same goals. And then your rank 3 plans have to reflect the same goals, so they build. But your rank 3 plan, your sector plans have more detail for your specific areas. So they were designed to match the policies of the comp plan. And then, so were the rank 3 ones too. And I can look at my rank 3 Coors Quarter Plan, and I see similar policies from our basic plan. So it wasn't that complicated. And it is a lot easier to read than what you have now. And the vision has changed because I know you're trying to make a more compact city, which is more density, But see, I think we have to be careful, like, I can understand that concept, the mixed use, more compact, transit oriented, but we could go down a path of a lot of abuse of when people get worried about density because they are a little more impactful, they block the views more, they have more overcrowding to the schools, especially on the west side, more traffic. So we have to, if we talk about more density, we have to be really careful to design it well, or we can have really ugly structures, and they don't blend with the area, and they tend to dominate the area. So if we don't do it right, we can make this a real ugly city.
So let me just interrupt real quick. Thank you for all your feedback. Your issue seems to be very similar to the one that Knob Hill is having right now with art and the sunsets and all that other stuff. And I don't know, I'm going to put this out, I don't know if it's true, but I think they've spoken with you guys and they're in dialogue with the city planning department to have 3-story buildings in this section, then we're going to go back to 2 stories buildings, then we're going to go up to 3 stories. So it's not just a line of 3 or 4 high-story buildings as was potentially originally identified. So you may want to talk with Adrian Carver, I believe is his name, I can give you his phone number, and see how they've gone to address that very issue that you're bringing up. And then, if you're good with that, Loretta, I just want to say, I believe you've raised your hand quite a while back. Did you want to bring up?
We did. I'm sorry I didn't check before. How many of these neighborhoods that we have in the central area have historic overlays? And how do those play with the IEO? Oh, and there's the switch number, but I just wonder, like,
There's 5.
Very good question.
sure.
There's most.
Yeah, in the city of Albuquerque, we have what are called historic overlay zones, and these are neighborhoods that have been identified and designated by the city council as having historical value in terms of their architecture, their platting, or someone famous lived here or died here or slept here at one time, or a combination of those things. The usual way to establish these, and there's about 5 or 6 around the downtown area, is that first you go to the federal government and the state government to get registered on the National Register of Historic Places and the State Register of Cultural Places. And those are the designations that are the carrots. They give property owners within those designated areas incentives to improve their properties and maintain the historic character of them by saying if you invest this much into maintaining your structure and improving it, you're going to get a tax break the following year. So that's the carrot. Then we have them possibly being designated by the city council as a historic overlay zone. That's the stick. That's when the city council says this neighborhood is so important, its look, its architecture, its layout is so important, we need to preserve it. And then they establish design standards. So if you do want to do an addition, if you want to change out your windows, if you want to put a new roof on, it has to be reviewed by the city's historic preservation planner or may have to go to the Landmarks and Urban Conservation Commission to get a certificate of appropriateness saying, yes, this addition, these new windows, this new roof is going to comply with the standards and fit in. And we have about 5 or 6 of those existing in the center city, in the older neighborhoods, and those are being carried over and put in the integrated development ordinance. So if there's a conflict between the underlying zoning and the historic overlay zone in terms of design, the historic overlay zone prevails.
And then, so it seems like most of the contention lies around corridors. And I know some people have been talking about cultural landscapes, but cultural landscapes aren't just, like landscapes. I mean, they're the corridors. Route 66 is a historic cultural landscape. And so I wonder if it's worth having even more specific discussions, like when people South Broadway are concerned. It's a lovely little street, and it's ripe for development. It should be alive again.
You're talking about Edith?
well, Edith and then South, I think it's on Broadway. There's like a couple of really great corridors that we have
Sure.
that they aren't alive anymore. And they probably really were at one time. We used to walk more in the city. We had streetcars. So I wonder if it's worth talking about the value of those as cultural landscapes. We were talking about the skinny streets. It's a completely different fabric. You know where you are. You're in a very different neighborhood. It's an older one. It means something. And hopefully you'll be interested in the history. So I wonder if we might prioritize, of course, what the history is and what the value is to people in those communities. So it might be easier to have the conversation about what they want to see, because we do think everybody wants to see those living again. I want restaurants and barbershops. I want to see a tailor, like a butcher. So I just wonder if there's a way that we might start to focus on what it is that's really concerning people, because I think we're having the same conversation, and everybody really does value our neighborhoods. It's what sets us apart. We're never going to be Denver.
We don't want to be Denver.
No, there's no way to be Denver.
And in the new comp plan, to be quite honest, the city is not proposing that any particular neighborhood becomes Denver,
Right.
especially not the historical and the old
I'm
ones.
glad you're pointing it out. And the other thing was, I do think, I see that everybody's really passionate about their own neighborhoods,
Yes.
but I also see, and maybe this is coming from having lived in Austin during growing pains, and LA during growing pains, and Orange County is really living their growing pains, is that we do, as a city, as a community, have to take a step back and see what the vision is for the whole city. I understand that everybody's passionate about their own neighborhoods. But how does your own neighborhood contribute to that vision? And let's talk about where we want to go. And then also, I think at the same time, I may be speaking totally off the cuff, but I think that as a region, we're also talking about land use and transportation issues out to 2040. So, we're part of that region and we have to play nice, and it would be better if we were all coordinated. And so, I think that's what you're saying.
Right, so first of all, let's make sure that you've identified yourself on a piece of paper and we can keep in touch and that kind of stuff. We're a very active neighborhood in terms of preserving the feel and the sense, and just coming up to that definition was a big effort in itself, and we're still at the very beginning of that. But yes, every one of the neighborhoods, especially the ones that have zone plans, definitely have a very strong self-identity, and they want to preserve that self-identity. And I think what the city is trying to do is that support that self-identity, at the same time not make every self-identity a book in and of itself, but provide an umbrella. And that's why I'm highly recommending that you speak with Adrian Carver, and I'll give you his phone number so you can figure out how he went about, him and his team or whatever, how they went about figuring out the compromises that needed to be done. And sorry, Loretta has been trying to...
I really have a problem when people keep saying that we're taken care of when we're zoned for 4-story apartments, commercial, heavy commercial, and we're saying that we're going to be protected by these design guidelines that are going to be along Broadway that going to make us look like a fortress with 4 stories high, and then a little lump down so that they can, well, they're not over you, but they're still shadowing you because they're taking your solar rides. And then there's no mixed use, it's just 4-story apartments and commercial on the bottom. We're not looking at planned areas where we're saying, if you want to have a single-family house in your neighborhood, you could look at the areas along Broadway where those industry is that are dying, and say, well, we want to put single-family townhomes, duplexes, and then we want senior housing so people get older, because most people in my neighborhood that get older don't want to leave their neighborhood, and they don't really want to leave their homes. But our homes are only like 500 square feet, 600, up to 900, so we have the density. So they want to stay in their area. This is one place that is a senior housing that they can come to and live with other seniors. But we're not looking at that in my neighborhood. We're looking at putting 4-story apartments, and then they're saying, Well, they're not gonna do that. Oh, yeah, when Decker Parish is being paid to write that document, and I had a meeting with him to tell me that he, meaning NAIA, was looking at my area as the bedroom community for the hospitals that they're building, and had the audacity to tell me that. And he's the main guy on the executive committee of NAIA, who went up to the city council and EPC and then city council, and said, we approve of this plan. And you don't think I should be concerned? And then you're telling me that once you're zoned that way, 4 stories, well, you don't even have to go through a public hearing. You're just gonna get it. And if you have language in the chapter 4 that says if it's a streamlined process and you're just gonna go straight to permitting, so you don't even have to go through any kind of process now. You don't have to go through EPC. You can notify the neighborhoods if you want, but you don't have to. And then you don't even go through EPC anymore. Then you're saying in chapter 3 that if you feel that your neighborhood is transitioning, because I went through the process with this, well, we didn't even ask to go through the process with the state. They just said we weren't historic. They had the audacity. 3 Anglo men walking through my neighborhood telling me that my neighborhood isn't historic. They don't even live here. They didn't even have the decency to ask our people, Ted Martinez, somebody that has had the history here, to walk with them. And then they determine where my plazas are, where they want their village centers at. And you're telling me that I should believe in that plan? I'm ashamed of all of you to think that I should believe in what you're putting for my neighborhood. And it is not 4 stories high of apartments. It's single family dwellings that families have lived for generations. My mom's family was, the town is named after them. The families live here. The Sandovals, the Bacas, all of them are living here. They're still living here. The Naranjos came in the late 1800s. They had the whole Walter Street there. I grew up with all my neighbors, and you're proposing to wipe us all out, bring us these ugly commercial businesses that have been going on for years. We have fought and fought to change that sector plan, and all I get is just talk, nothing else. For 5 years I worked with the business people to come up with an agreement, and we still didn't get our sector plan. And you want me to agree with this plan? How am I going to trust you when you made it so difficult for us to get our R1? All we were asking for is to look at our land use that has been historical R1, and we can't even get it. And then I have somebody that doesn't even live in my neighborhood running the show, type that thing up with the other guy that he worked on with Sawmill, because he did the Sawmill plan with Sawmill. So they've been partners together, the guy from Denver. Denver was saturated with apartments. The only lucky thing for them, wait, I haven't finished. The only lucky thing for them is they have the marijuana now. They're filling up those apartments like crazy. But if they didn't have that marijuana, they wouldn't have had people living in Denver like that. They saturated with apartments.
Okay, Loretta, thank you. Not kidding yourself alone, the team to...
I thought you said we were going to have all night. Last night you said we were going to have all night to
we
talk.
can stay here all night, not you haunting the whole time. We still have to share. You brought up a lot of the issues, so let's hear some rebuttals or feedback.
I also wanted to ask about
It's on the-
what Loretta just said. The thing about the 4-story is that, I mean, within Martineztown, is there, or
It's
Martineztown, Santa Barbara?
MXM,
Where-
4-story apartments.
It's clear, so.
Where is that allowed?
But we're talking
Everywhere.
about the integrated development ordinance language.
But you're mapping it
Let
and
answer,
the
Loretta.
language
So let me
saying it.
respond, please. So you're talking about, I just want to be clear, this is about the rules in the regulatory document, which is
That's
not
not clear enough.
talked about on March 6th, where we're talking about the comp plan. We just want to kind of keep our separations straight. The rules in here for the different zones are for the equivalent of what your sector plan zones things today. So if apartments are allowed today, apartments are allowed under the integrated development ordinance.
You're
So we are not-
changing the zone. You
Are
are not changing it.
We are changing dimensions
You're
and
changing
standards
language,
and
everything.
process. Yes, but we are not changing the entitlements of what they could do today and what they could do in the future. So if apartments are allowed today, apartments will be allowed in the future. And yes, the IDO has different standards, different processes about that zone. So I agree with you there, but it's not that it suddenly allows apartments where they wouldn't be allowed today. And the additional protections in the integrated development ordinance for the neighborhood edges can kick in if there's a city-sponsored rezoning of exactly to address what you mentioned, where you have single-family homes that are zoned for something other than single-family, which the policies of this document would now support a city-sponsored zone change to fix that.
So Michaela, you're gonna say that when they built those 2 apartments over there, those 2 high apartments that don't even go in character with our neighborhood on
That
the
we're allowed under sector plan.
We're allowed without grading and drainage, the water goes into Joseph's house, and we informed the city about that before, and they still did nothing to make that property owner brand new homes, didn't do any grading and drainage, the water's going through, right now going through Joseph's property, and check it off, and so that's not gonna happen either.
I
So,
don't
I
think
mean-
it's a zoning issue.
It is a zoning issue.
It's
a
an enforcement issue
requirement,
for
yeah.
sure, but I don't think it's a problem with the zoning requirement.
Enforcement did come out and they allowed it. That's what, and then one day I was gonna want to build a patio cover in my backyard. You know what they were worried about? My drainage, where would the water go off my roof? It couldn't go into other people's property, but yet the zoning allowed that property to drain underground into somebody's property. So that's the trust. How can we trust it if the language isn't in there?
So when you're saying you can transition, you can you're gonna be allowed to streamline the process, and the guy's writing it, he's being paid to write this plan. I wanna know how much he's getting paid. I guess I have to do an IPRA request, because I'm sure he's getting paid a lot of money to tell me what my neighborhood's gonna look like.
So actually, from my understanding of the comp plan, we've been meeting now for about at least 4 months with the city on a weekly basis, and then every other 2 weeks, to address all the issues that you brought up.
But did you
Issues-
represent the
Okay.
commercial people?
No, I don't represent the commercial.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't. I represent the neighborhood
You don't
association
represent-
as the president of the neighborhood association. I represent everybody, which is one of the big efforts that I've made, Loretta, on your behalf, is to make sure that we have a global downsizing so that land use and zone codes actually match. And that's one of the major protections that we're going to have. Just give me 1 second. The other protection that we've had that you brought up, and not only you, a lot of people, and this pertains to many other historical districts, is the fact that we're concerned that the look of our neighborhood is going to be gone because nobody's paying attention to that. One of the documents that we have on our website and that I want to distribute, and that might be of interest to you, those are design guidelines for this neighborhood particularly, as a concept that applies to all neighborhoods that are historical, that are old, that have been around for a while. And if we can get together and have one of these documents perhaps, or 2 of these documents, or one document with a few appendices, the city will probably be a lot more interested and able to maintain the fact that historical neighborhoods want to remain historical in the look, in the architecture, in the identity, in the culture, in the physical landscape, all that kind of stuff. Today, Martineztown specifically is a wounded duck sitting in the middle of the plains. We have no protections whatsoever. When we have the comp plan, if it's approved, you can look on our board, we've gone around asking, can high-rise apartments be built in our neighborhood? Yes, but if the comp plan passes, the answer is more likely to be no. What can we do? The pink sheet is the action. The 3 goals that we have for Santa Barbara Martineztown are in the current comp plan, and each one of those goals is addressed. You can look at the second page over, and that will tell you where they're addressed. This neighborhood has been, and I apologize for my Japanese, has been screwed over and over, and we have a lack of trust of the white man, the commercial man, the businessman, the industrial man. We were cut off by the highway. We have our little northern part that's, what is it? We don't know. It's not us. It's kind of them, whatever. And we have to deal with the fact that we have a big industrial section now that we didn't want originally, but it's there, and now we have to deal with it. And we have the old space that we have. We had a swamp where we now have a big swath of residential homes. So we have a lot of stuff in this neighborhood, and I do believe, and I do know, that looking at the comp plan, we are going to be protected in ways that we're not protected today. The 4-story high-rise, yes, if there is a lot that's big enough today that some developer wants to put 4 stories in, if they have the space, the parking, the lighting, and all that other stuff, they can do it a lot easier today than they'll be able to do it once the comp plan and the IDO are passed. Once those are passed, there's some ownership, there is height restrictions, there is spacing between, there's parking that has to be attended, and on and on and on. And the most important part, which does not exist today for any of our neighborhoods, certainly not for ours, is the fact that a developer has to come to us first, make a presentation, show us slides. If we're happy with the presentation, we feel comfortable understanding what the future is going to be, we can say yay or nay, or even request a time. Let's think about this for 2 weeks, let's have another meeting, whatever. We have none of that today. So there is a lot of misconceptions and fear-mongering, as far as I'm concerned, about what this comp plan does, primarily, which is an injustice to us, and I don't see that. My major task as a neighborhood association president is to protect the neighborhood from unwanted developers. There was no neighborhood association to speak with when the triplex was built, and I believe it's about the same thing that happened when the apartments were built at the corner of Indian School and Broadway. So we ended up with stuff that doesn't belong in our neighborhood. And with Councilor Benton and with the planning department, we've created now a dialogue. And I'm hoping that the dialogue will continue and be preemptive as well, not just when the building has been signed off. Oh, by the way, the building is starting tomorrow, but rather 6 months, 2 months before that, we'll be told, hey, there's a building coming up, check it out.
I want to give an example of the existing comprehensive plan. This area around the downtown area is designated central urban. The central urban goal and policies currently talk about this needs to be the densest part of the city. It needs to be where we have cultural facilities like museums, and also the developing and established urban goal and policies apply as well. And the developing and established urban areas talk about create a quality urban environment that perpetuates the tradition of identifiable, individual, compact, but integrated communities within the metropolitan area that offers variety and maximum choice in housing, transportation, work areas, and lifestyles while creating a visually pleasing built environment. What does that mean? It means different things to different people. It has been interpreted different ways by different applicants, different agents, different decision makers over the past 30 years that these policies have been on the books. They're specific enough that someone can point to, well, I want to increase the density on my property from single family to apartments because it says right here that it needs to be compact. And they'll cite that and use that as their justification. Maybe the decision maker, the planning commission says, well, we don't agree with you. What does the neighborhood say at the public hearing? And it becomes a debate or a negotiation at the public hearing. If you look up on the map of the areas of change and consistency, we're trying to be a little bit more fine-grained by saying if you're single-family zone or use, you're an area of consistency, and there needs to be some special protections that are included in the policies for areas of consistency.
So those for us, I believe, are the beige parts, right? On this map, right? And the orange parts are the areas where there would be more availability unless the community says otherwise to move things more around.
And you might wonder, well, why did this area with single-family homes get zone C3 or C3 light? It's really C2 with some C3 uses thrown in. But why did that happen? Because probably the drafters of that plan and the decision makers at that time So, well, that complies with the central urban and the established urban goal of having a compact community with maximum choice in housing, transportation, work areas, and lifestyles. It all fits in. But I'm saying that might have happened because those are the policies that were in place. Those are the policies that are in place.
Updated, we're just saying that we want stronger language to protect our neighborhoods. We want an EPC that represents neighborhoods leaders too, not just NAIOP. We want a city council that represents us too. And we're saying we want a stronger language. It's that central urban, because you know I've read that, refers to the sector plans. And that's where our sector plans get very specific in protecting us. They're very strong in many of the South Broadway, San Jose, Wells Park. They're strong. No, they need to be stronger, we know, on environmental. They need to get rid of stop putting in those industries in that area. That's for sure, but your plan isn't doing that. So Esther's saying that's not strong enough for us.
Well,
We want no cumulative effects allowed in this area. That's what they want in that plan. So we're saying, yes, it needs to be updated. There we agree. We're not disagreeing with you. But what we're saying is that we weren't asked to be at the table. NAIOP was. And they got everything they wanted. Yes, they were. His name is in there. He's on the executive committee. And the people went up for him to say they agreed with him. So I'm just saying, we want that opportunity too.
There's a proposed action in the draft update to the comprehensive plan that says, work with residents and stakeholders through the community planning assessment process to analyze and recommend adjustments to policy and/or regulatory protections for existing single-family and two-family homes.
That's after the fact. 5 years, that's a long time. That assessment is done for sector plans. You do the assessment first, and then you put it in a plan. What are you going to do with our assessment? Throw it in the air? What's going to happen? Do another plan? Yeah, you're going to have to put it somewhere. So why get rid of the sector plans? You've got to put those issues and concerns in some kind of record. So why not keep the sector plans? Assessments are done before you put together a sector plan.
So let me understand. So from the sector plan to the IDO, is there a substantial change? I mean, are all
Oh,
things that you
definitely.
wanted to-
Sector plans are comprehensive in nature themselves. They
Except
work
for-
for a specific small area. A general plan is looking at the whole city of Albuquerque. There is no way that plan can be as intricate and detailed as a sector plan is for a certain area of its uniqueness. No way. You're even calling my neighborhood railroad. It never was railroad. It started agricultural. Now, maybe it went through those periods, but you're not defining it because you have 500 pages to say. There's no way you can do it in a general plan. And so that's why you need those sector plans. And if we get rid of that, we don't need you guys. We just need processors, because that's all we'll need in the planning department. We don't need planners. Well, we just need processors. You get rid of those plans, and we do not need you guys. We could pay less. We don't even have to pay that much. We'll get less, probably charge $12 an hour, and, which isn't even a living wage, but that's all we need.
Thank you.
So the one thing that it seems like everybody agrees on is that the process doesn't work. And
I disagree with that.
the standard process, like all across the country, it's not working for anybody. So.
And I disagree because I know that Kim worked in Seattle, it's happening, sector plans are going on there. There's a planner that was from MIT that's in your neighborhood said that they have them. Sector plans are working. Euclidean zoning wasn't about suburbia. It was about protecting the health, safety, and welfare of residents.
Yeah.
It was about when they had fires in Chicago that they didn't have setbacks. And now in this plan, they're not requiring setbacks. The setbacks were so that the fires didn't catch on to the next building. They wanted those setbacks. There's a lot of reasons for Euclidean zoning. It was to separate incompatible uses that were not allowed next to residential. But because we're a poor minority area, they put whatever they want to. Go talk to San Jose, they'll tell you about the pollution they smell every day, and then you want to tell me that you're gonna do some kind of wall or something to deal with the pollution? That's not gonna help them. The walls aren't gonna help them, or whatever you're considering isn't gonna help them.
So
Those plants
No.
need to be enforced with somebody that's gonna do something about them. They shouldn't be running if they're polluting our air.
So Loretta, thank you again for your comments. They're very passionate as usual. They're good. Just as an aside, setbacks are definitely in Martineztown, as everywhere in the city. As a landscaper, I always have to add setbacks. So today there's setbacks. There's no setbacks in the comp plan because the comp plan is not about building, it's about shoulds. The look. Once you get the look, then you identify how the look is going to be applied. And if you're looking for setbacks, they would be to the IDO. One of the things that's really important, and I would agree with you, is the fact that once a comp plan is approved, or not, but let's assume it's approved at some point, the residents have to continue the dialogue. It's not like, oh, the comp plan is done, and my hands are washed off. No, it continues, the residents continue to review the comp plan, number one. The city is planning to do that as well, good for them, and I appreciate that. And the IDO is still in the future, and that's something that we as residents must participate in that as well. And whether we like it or not, I drive around the city all the time because of my job, and I see all kinds of neighborhoods that are like ours, and I see all kinds of changes in those neighborhoods, some that's possibly wanted, some that's most likely unwanted. And I'm not focusing on everybody else's neighborhoods. You guys are doing that with the Historical Neighborhood Alliance, and I think that's a great effort and a necessary effort. But for Martineztown, I can only do what I can for this neighborhood. And well, there's more than us doing the dialogue, a dialogue with the city to make sure that this neighborhood doesn't stay dilapidated with vacant lots, that people are just going to buy the lots from old people who can't afford to maintain them in the first place. We want to revitalize this neighborhood and keep it looking whatever Martineztown looks like, and that's kind of...
Well, we already did that with Site Southwest, we worked that out. That's it,
I asked you for the document. I asked you for the document.
Right there, isn't enforceable.
It's not, of course it's not enforceable, I never said that it was.
It's
It's
not
a first
ordinance.
step towards a character preservation. I asked you for that document and I haven't received it yet, maybe it got lost in the mail or something like that. But this is a process. Go ahead.
Oh, and Lord, I wanted to point out, we did listen to you, and there is a proposed action in the land use element of the comprehensive plan update that says, work with property owners to identify mismatches between existing land uses, zoning, and the comprehensive plan vision, and recommend city-sponsored zone changes for the future. It's not an action item that we have now in our existing comprehensive plan or in the Martineztown Santa Barbara sector development plan. Getting it in the updated comprehensive plan will give us direction and give the idea to the decision makers that, hey, this is important to neighborhoods and we really need to do that in the community planning area assessment process. Michaela talked about the 5-year update process for the comprehensive plan. It does not restrict or eliminate the possibility of doing area-wide, small area-wide zone changes by the city council. They're still the ultimate planning and zoning authority, and if something needs fixing sooner than 1 year, than 5 years, they maintain that authority to do that. But the updated comprehensive plan gives them the support and the backing to do that. When currently they could, but if someone says you can't do that, there's not much policy to support it. We want to build that in now so that if there is any opposition or appeal, so to speak, that there is language in there for the city council to say, hey, we're doing this and we're supported by the policy.
Well, that's good language, but we want to sit down and work this out. We want to be able to compromise on what we're talking about and be able to come and say, these are the things that we think are going to be stronger for this plan and are needed, and that they're going to be listened to. Because I've heard you guys say the same thing. This meeting was the same address that I've heard for like probably what now, I don't know how many
24
meetings
months.
I got to, and it hasn't changed. So we're just saying, we want to be able to have language in this plan that's going to really support neighborhoods. We want the health, safety, and welfare of the residents protected. We want a strong economic interior that helps community businesses that are there for our community, that serve us. Because we want to know, right now, they're not showing how we're benefiting from this. We know how the developers are benefiting, but we're not benefiting. And we pay a lot of taxes here. And those taxes are used for many of these developers to do whatever they want. And yet, we're in the hole right now, $1 billion in deficit. Have you seen in the comp plan where they're saying we're $1 billion in infrastructure repair, of 700 million in deficiencies? And then I don't know what our budget is, which should be balanced. You know, we're required to balance that budget because we've allowed to grow out, and we haven't been thinking about how to really we've been allowing the developers to control the planning department and haven't really been planning. So I'm saying let's plan and let's work it out with the residents here that pay taxes and make sure that residents' health, safety, and welfare are protected.
Thank you, Loretta. There's 3 other people that are waiting to ask questions. What I definitely suggest and ask of you to do is put all those in writing, all those suggestions you want to see implemented.
Oh, no, we're already
and send them.
doing that.
Perfect, then we're done. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm Chris Howard, and I'm from the neighborhood south here, South Martineztown, and thank you for hosting this meeting. My experience, our experience in South Martineztown with this whole process, first of all, when we became involved, we were a little slow to catch on to the level of change, what comprehensive plan and then the IDO, because it's extremely, we're looking at 800 pages if you look at the 2 of them. And so we didn't participate in those early focus groups where a lot of the policy came out. And that's just how it was. And so we do feel that we're coming from behind in many cases. And however, it has been my experience that there's a small core group of us, about a dozen, even less, probably about 6, who are, and we're not planners, and some we're not. However, it's been our experience that for the last 6 months, that when we are specific and put our concerns in writing, we tease out from the text and the text and then our sector plan. We are fortunate that we have a sector plan. So when we look at the overarching policies, and then we look at the detail. I'm not an engineer or an architect. Ask me about healthcare financing, I might have an answer there. But what we've kind of seen, what we've seen is we see something, we say, hey, wait a minute. We'd like more notification in the administrative section. There's a chapter called Administrative and Rules. I think that I'm paraphrasing.
In
enforcement. Administrative and enforcement. And about the neighborhood organization responsibilities and the communication. And that was a real concern with us, that something could happen and we don't have a clue. And so we came in with some language suggestions that we thought would improve notification. Using email. But so my point is that this is hard and it's complicated, and I think my experience has been when I put things down in writing and ask the city planning staff to take a look at, these are our concerns, and I have them in writing, the specific concerns, and I shared that with you, our recent comments on the IDO. And what we did in our neighborhood, and I'll just wrap up, I need 2 more minutes, thank you. We did a drive around and a walk around and say, this is what bothers us right now. Will the IDO fix this? Is this something that can be changed? And so are these areas of zoning enforcement that's fallen through the cracks because zoning enforcement isn't doing their job? And I will say that I have had good and bad experiences with zoning enforcement. I've had a request to zoning enforcement on one issue since since April of last year, and I haven't gotten a response from zoning enforcement, and I've asked them to put it in writing. What is your decision? And I have no response. And it's on me now to force that issue, to do top down. I've tried, with staff and supervisors and managers, and no response now. I'm ready to say, Mr. Benton, why won't they respond to this if they made a decision?
As well you should.
Exactly.
I want to know
it's 10 months. Well, April is coming up on 10 months. And so there's some glitches that happen. But I really, and I know this last document that I put in writing to planning staff about the IDO, we threw everything in there that we could have thought, that we thought about. And we have a much smaller area, and we have a giant gorilla, the health complex. We are surrounded, as you are. We are surrounded.
Is there a question for?
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. So my comment is that when we put things in writing and give it to the planning staff, I've had answers. So I have one more. I do have a comment, and this is getting right back to the original 12-month, the negotiation of 24 months is too long, 12 maybe. Is there perhaps there may be an opportunity for a round of focus groups again, a 6-week intense focus group, now that we know something, to go back to, I don't know. Can you speak to any of that?
I can. So I'm not speaking for decision makers, I'm speaking as a person involved in the public engagement thus far. In my opinion, we're just at a point of disagreement about what the plan says. And from my opinion, I believe the decision makers need to make a decision and either amend it to say something different or adopt it in the way that it is. I personally think after hundreds of meetings and focus groups and additional meetings and additional listening, we hear the same things again and we just disagree in this moment. And so I personally think it's ripe for a decision and put the policy protections that are in here, spread them to all communities, and then begin the hard process through the community planning areas to take a close look at them again and say, how do we adjust them? I personally think putting the protections in place is urgent, and then we spend 48 months with each of the communities going through them at the level of detail that I think you're asking for. In terms of the integrated development ordinance, we haven't even started the review and approval process. To date, we have just come to a draft, and it's taken 24 months, and the pieces have been out there for a year to review, but now it's time to start the discussion of let's go through it, and let's find the mistakes, and let's make it better. That's what the review and approval process is for. So is this ready to adopt today? No. We're ready to start the discussion about this today in front of the Planning Commission, and then the Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee at the City Council, and then the City Council. So we have at least 6 months of talking and reviewing and document before it's even ready to think about being adopted. Is it ripe for discussion though? Absolutely. And I would love to take all the time in the world to talk to people about these very important documents, but the reality is people pay attention when it's in the review and approval process. And that's where we are today, and that's why people are reading it, and that's why people are getting concerned, because oh my gosh, it's actually about to happen. And so we can have discussions like this and other meetings that we've had and other community planning area meetings that we've had and other Spanish language meetings that we've had to help people feel more comfortable with what's in here. But I think it's time for decision makers to make a decision.
Michaela, when it comes to the IDO and feedback, I know you were talking about presentations to the council and the city and EPC. What about our involvement in that process? How is that going to look like?
Yeah, so the Planning Commission has scheduled the first hearing on this regulatory document for April 6th. It's scheduled for the council chambers, the same place where the city council meets. And it's scheduled from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. that day so that we can take testimony all through the afternoon and into the evening. If you can only come in the evening, great. If you can only come during the day, that's great. It'll be a rolling sign-up so anybody can make comments.
So if I understand you right, one has to have read the document and understood it before they can come over? Or you guys are going to do teaching sessions on?
We will continue to do teaching sessions. We will continue to meet Monday and Friday afternoons with anyone who has any kind of question. If you can't come to a hearing at all and you just want to send in written comments, we're responding to each and every one in a matrix of responses that are posted on the website as well. They'll be in the staff report for the hearings. And, we'll meet with anyone anywhere and discuss anything we can. At this point, it is in the review and approval process, so we can't arbitrarily make changes to the document. We have to submit them to the EPC as conditions of approval for them to consider and adopt as part of their vote.
So I know there's two more questions on the floor. One, you've been trying to ask a question like forever now.
Tell them. But it wasn't.
Like you're saying that it's commercial or residential, it's supposed to be 100 feet away. Well, in my situation, it didn't happen that way. And if we can get all these industrials and all these chemicals from underground, I had that done at my property. I'm a homeowner. Is that going to happen again when we get these new buildings coming up? When we get chemicals going in our water, in our air, around our neighborhood? We don't need that. All we need is just to be a safe neighborhood. And that's what we are. We don't need these big buildings in our neighborhood. We need you guys to come and just, we've been ignored many more than once, and I know that I did with us. And now it's time for you guys to start paying attention to our neighborhood. Instead of thinking big, think about us. Think about our children, our grandchildren. They're the ones going to be sticking in Martineztown, nowhere else. We don't want these buildings here. We don't want these construction, two-story houses, apartments. We're happy what we have. Just help us get ahead. That's it.
I think that's possible through our proposed community planning area assessments, where we will spend months in the community visiting with property owners, with residents and businesses to see what's working, what's not working, write an analysis, make recommendations, take those through the planning commission for public hearing, and ultimately up to the city council, that's the ultimate planning and zoning authority, with recommendations about, protecting the community, recommended zone changes, recommended changes to the integrated development ordinance, recommended changes to policy, but we just don't have that system in place now.
Like we have commercials, we don't want this hazard of oil spilling over. Just chemicals. We don't want that.
Right.
But I dealt with that. I dealt with that. I got that. Thank you.
I think, you were first.
Mine's two-part. One I want to say is that in the 5 years that I've been watching city council, EPC, the commissions and everything, it's your counselor that oversees your protection, and Councilman Benton is very involved, and I'm a critic. My councilman is the oldest seated councilman in the area, going on his 20th year, something like that, and I was speaking with his policy analyst today. And I feel that I have to come to the defense on some things, because I'm very active in planning and watching what's going on in our city, and I can quote what's going on in our city. Mayoral candidates are coming to me to use it in their campaigns, because I know what the history of development is. But our city council does have very good staff. As much as I criticize Andrew, Mr. Burrito, and certain people, they are an asset to what we are doing, because without having these things implemented and without having certain policies and the IDO to protect us, these NAIOP developers, as we know, can run rapid, because as they said, if they wanted to come right now, because for example, that's why I came tonight. They're a small historical area. You shouldn't be touched. It should be preserved. Certain areas should be preserved for their heritage and why they're here and how the city developed. We're seeing Old Town is being affected terribly by what's going on in the sawmill. And when I was younger, I lived in sawmill. I'm from here. When I rented, I lived in all over the city. So to their defense, you know, I can understand what Michaela's saying, because we have to have these policies. I gripe, but I gripe about my specific thing. Something that my councilman works very hard with me on, and that is what you need to do. You need to go to every one of these hearings. You need to go, or if can't go, you need to get the minutes. If you can't get the minutes, you need to call your councilman, because all of them have an open door policy. They may not agree with us and what we are, but being Albuquerque, we're seeing what's happening. And it's happening every day. Every day somebody, developers going in and saying, well, hey, this has this. Well, that might have been a mistake. That commercial next to us, or taking our residential and stripping us of our identity. Councilman Benjamin doesn't know all of these things. It's a specific person or an area or something that got through. That is what I do for my community, is you have to be diligent. And it is the public. As much as we think Councilman Benton rules everything, or these people rule everything, they don't. It's us. And just here, the small group, this is larger, isn't it, than most. The ones that you have in your meetings are larger than most of the communities within the city that come out and participate. And that's what it is. It's participation, so you know what's going on. And as you said, you're concerned about your area. We're all concerned. But we have an obligation in our historical neighborhoods to preserve the heritage, the buildings. If we're going to put money into anything, it's going to come in here, upgrade so you're not flooded. We're going to wall off imaginary to make sure nobody comes in and takes from these established families, because you are our history. You know, we know where it comes from, and I think that's where a lot of people get really upset, is our identity goes out the door when somebody else's door opens up and says, I'm richer, bigger, more powerful, and I'm going to build those four-story buildings. You know, that's what I'm fighting right now. But I have to tell you, as much as I gripe, my councilman is working very diligently, and you can ask Andrew. You know, I'm in there. Nobody likes what I say any more than I like what people say to me. But you have to participate, and as you go all the time. And just saying because you agree that something has to be done doesn't mean you're throwing people underneath the bus and saying, I'm not protecting you, or I'm not doing something. I came with that attitude when I first started, and that was one of the first things that I was humbled with, was that I could not attack somebody else and say that they're not doing the best that they can. Because I have to tell you, I started thinking it was conspiracy to take Albuquerque. I mean, I had all kinds of people involved. There isn't a conspiracy. It's a group of people. In my case, they didn't do us right. That's why I came tonight, because you're small. And that's my problem, is that Albuquerque is very dense. Albuquerque is very small. So when we have a change, or we have a four-story building come up, it does impact the people within the neighborhood, and it changes the way you look. So my last thing to say is that as much as I disagree, and I disagree a lot with what's going on, the IDO is what's going to protect us. And the comprehensive plan right now, I don't believe it changes anything, it just stays the same, right? There's nothing in there.
I was gonna ask Russell to just go back to that community goals, of strong neighborhoods, sustainability. That stuff was really not in there before. I mean, there are stronger, it contains much stronger language than existed before in the comp plan itself about protecting neighborhoods like this one. And, in our district, we have, probably the majority of the historic neighborhoods are in District 2. And, I take them very seriously. If there's a bad project proposed for this neighborhood, I would fight it, right? The townhouses, of course, that were built up there were built under straight zoning, it was under the old school, townhouse zoning, they were able to build them,
But they didn't build it right because there's the angles that they have
Right.
to follow, and Joseph and them don't have any sunlight. It's
But
a
again,
shade
that
over there.
old,
That was then.
the old system failed us there. I think the new system could give us strength.
Yeah, but I have an issue when the planner is saying that she's ready for this to go, when Susan
Well, that would
Lubar happens to be her boss, who was the employee of Decker Parish, who's on the executive committee of NAIOP, and saying this is ready to go, when we're saying we want to compromise. We want to work this out. We know this comp plan needs to be updated, but it shouldn't be for only one small group of this town that is using our dollars to decide how we should
I don't believe
look.
that's the case.
Well, I do.
I don't believe
When
that's
you're
the case.
zoning me 4 stories high, yes, I do, and you're saying that high density is
Loretta,
required
the
all
problem
over
is
the
that this is
city?
not what the
I
comp
do
plan
agree.
is offering us.
Wait,
The
I
comp plan is
haven't
not
finished, you said
offering
like, I'm just, would you let me finish? I'm saying, if you're requiring that my property and the property around me is to be 4-story high with commercial.
Absolutely not.
Yes, it is,
Absolutely
it's known that way. And you're
Absolutely
saying
not.
it's even more intense when you're looking at that document, and there's no setbacks, there's no requirements, no solar rights, we want them stronger. We want
Comp
solar
plan
rights
is
stronger.
just
Okay, thank you, Loretta. This is a.
High density through that whole plan.
Thank you very much. Yes,
So I have to do
Martineztown,
screen, and I'll show you high density.
Those protections right there are not in the comp plan today.
Just say
So
high
I'm saying this is an
density.
advancement. I said at the beginning that I think it's about 90% of where it needs to be. Now, what's it gonna take to get the remaining 10%? Is it 2 years? Is it 1 year? Is it a shorter time? I don't know. And we probably need to pass this, even if it's 90% improvement, which I think it is. I
Counselor,
think
we weren't at the
we need to
table when
pass the
that plan was
comprehensive.
developed. It was
Then we can get to the
Decker
next
Parish and
phase.
NAIOP. We were not at
That's
the
just not
table.
true.
You
That's
sat on
just
the
not
table, we
true.
didn't. You were hearing us after you made that plan.
The community
Yeah,
planning meetings I
yeah,
went to
yeah,
were
yeah.
not dominated by me.
Loretta, I've seen that the city council listened to your feedback, to other people's feedback.
No, they didn't,
And the
because
meeting
I'm still
after, the
zoned.
month after, or
I'm
even
still
2 weeks
zoned
after, I've seen their
4-story
language
apartments.
change. I thought you told me not to interrupt you, so please do me the same courtesy. But I've heard it with my own eyes and my own ears. Putting your comments, putting my comments, other people's comments into the comp plan and showing us on the screen where the text was changed and how it was changed based on our comments. You've been at the table, you've been at all those meetings since I don't know when. And your
I have to
comments have
listen
been
to-
heard. Your comments have been heard.
Well,
In any
yeah.
case, let's not repeat the same message over and
You
over because
can't
that's
say
not very
that, you don't know what
constructive.
my comments were, you weren't at the meetings.
I've been at the meetings, I've
No,
heard
you
your
haven't.
comments.
You have not.
That's okay, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to ask that question. You were talking about like straight zoning, this thing got built and it doesn't look as attractive as you'd like it to be. And see, that's what I'm worried about this plan is we're kind of going in that direction. We're going to be focusing on the rules, on our IDO rules, and there's not going to be as many EPC hearings where people can discuss their concerns and point out where they're in compliance or they could do a better job doing this. and the EPC say, yeah, okay, let's defer it, let's see if you can come up with something better, and then you force them to do something better. And so we're kind of going in this direction of straight
The
zoning.
EPC is what, 5% of new development goes to the EPC. The rest of it goes through straight approval processes. And guess what? We can't legislate good design through that kind of a process. I mean, good design is good design, bad design is bad design. The only place where you get to have that discussion, you're right, is at an EPC hearing. Do you want an EPC hearing for every development that goes into this city? If so, we're never going to have development. We're not going to
Really,
good or
but
bad.
the planners are
okay.
saying that it's 90%.
Good or
Because
bad.
somehow you turned it up to 60.
Is there a way then that we could get better design and, I mean, maybe hire somebody that's an expert on building layout, architecture, and forces them to do that?
Within the form-based, provisions of the zoning, of the current plans like North 4th Street, the more modern plans, do have some restrictions and some requirements as far as making the buildings more human scale and things like that. But that still isn't going to create, necessarily a great design for every building. It's just,
And
you've
we
got
still
some
have
bad designers and good designers.
So let me just say two things about what the integrated development ordinance does to kind of address what you're getting at. One is requiring meetings with the neighborhood associations so that you can have those conversations about what good design
That's
you'd
the
like to
best
see.
venue.
And secondly, there are design standards for building facades, for how much of your surface area should be windows and entrances, and every 25 feet you have to have some kind of articulation on your building, so that we don't just get boxes. But that all those standards are requirements up front. You don't have to go to EPC to ask for them. They're just requirements of development in that zone. So those are already built into this, and right now we have big box ordinances that say if you're 190,000 square feet and bigger, well then you have to do good architecture. This says it doesn't matter how big or small you are, you have to do a good job with design, and that's just a requirement. It's not a negotiation.
Well, I do appreciate the bill that you just passed, or the ordinance you just passed for noise, for the new mixed use. That is something that was extremely needed, and as has been mentioned, there was, I don't know, I think it was city planning, was it city planning that brought in that the neighborhood associations needed to be involved when the developer had to acknowledge and give notice, because that wasn't in there, and that's how a lot of this happened. That's what happened to us. There was no rule that said, go to their area and give them that notice. We had no notice. And this gives you more due process. It actually allows your legislative department or your council to work more in your benefit, because you have such a tier of hierarchy within the city of who does what. And I'm not an opponent for that. I mean, I don't want it because of my area, but it certainly does protect other areas. You might not like that there was a 4-story building, apartments that are on the books already. That got on the books because you weren't protected. And I wish I could say everything bad, but I can't say everything bad because I've sat through the hearings. I've asked my questions. I put them to the grind to say, how can you do this? And know that these things, there are some things in the IDO that I have to ask whether or not they are legal because they affect property rights. But even me, I have to say, in the 5 years that I've been watching this, this is probably the best procedure that's going to come in and protect your area. And you have to give kudos where it's due. And we may not like NAIOP, and I'm an expert on NAIOP and their development and what they own, but you can't do things unless it's legal. As much as I'd like to say NAIOP has that power to go in there, they are the Albuquerque Development Commissioners, and whatever, they do not have that right. And that's what I was bringing up, and then why I came tonight, was just to give you an example of what happens when you don't have rules, because it happened to us, and it ruined our area. And I've got to say this out loud. I've watched you go in there, and I've heard your testimony, and I think it's very unfair for anybody to say that you have gone in there with the best interest of the people that live in your community. Because I have heard you say it, and I've not heard you say that you believe in the direction that the commercial developers are getting more say than your community. She has actually gone in there and said, this is good for my community, but she's not advocating for the developers.
She doesn't even live in our neighborhood.